Marco Rubio, the Cuban hope, the Latino hope for the GOP. I don't think so. Probably one of the biggest hypocrites out there. And he threw his own Cubans and his own Latinos supporters under the bus. I'm going to tell you how. Now, as many of you know, my former career is background in executive loss prevention, mainly for Macy's, but as some of you know, I also worked for IKEA furniture stores down in Florida, basically the same capacity. I worked in Sunrise, Florida, which is a suburb of Fort Lauderdale. Now, some of you may remember an incident with between Marco Rubio and IKEA just before the 2012 elections. And that had to pertain to IKEA using Cuban political prisoners to build their furniture. Marco Rubio was out there. He was out there with a congressman from down here, a female, Ileana Sanchez, I think her last name is, but she's another Republican, but she's a congresswoman. And they were out here how this was horrible, and they wanted answers from IKEA. Now, based on my career, I've been very fortunate, and I've gotten some inside information on a lot of things in business, but even with these politicians, much like how I worked with Donald Trump back in 2004 on a television commercial where it was just myself, Donald Trump, and his security guy, that big guy who stands behind him who threw out Jorge Ramos, that guy. So I've been very fortunate to get some unique perspectives and some unique insight. So for those of you who don't know, yeah, Marco Rubio, back right before the 2012 elections, had gone out and made this issue with IKEA that IKEA had been using Cuban political prisoners to build their furniture back in the 80s, which actually is absolutely true. And it was well known within the company, and they all would talk about it, the managers, and laugh about it, the upper echelon managers. Now, how IKEA works is, even though they're a worldwide company, you have IKEA Europe, IKEA USA, every single IKEA location is basically its own company. And they set out to make their own goals. They have some corporate goals, but they can deviate from whatever they want. But being each store is basically an independent company, each store deals with issues like this, media issues like this individually, and has a media relations person that works directly in the building. Just so it's like plausible deniability to protect all the other stores and IKEA US and IKEA worldwide. Okay, but it's really a scam. But what that means is, since Marco Rubio was a senator, this was coming out of two Florida politicians, a senator and a congressman, one being Marco Rubio, it came directly to our location. Our media relations person is me as the security and safety director. I was involved in these conversations. Well, the first thing I'll tell you about IKEA is the store manager. You know, when I got hired as the director there, sat me down and let me know about the company of IKEA to begin with. And what you may not know is IKEA doesn't actually make any profit all out of their buildings, out of their store locations. See, IKEA owns the distribution, they own the production. These are all separate companies with IKEA. So that's where they're making the majority of their money. And most of their furniture is made in Russia by North Korean political prisoners and Russian political prisoners sent to Russia to cut timber and make this cheap furniture. Great. Wonderful. What a great company. And they are a terrible company. A terrible company. A company, mind you, that protects child abusers and child molesters. Oh yeah, they do. Oh yeah, they do. That's a subject for another video. So what happened with Marco Rubio? The media push goes out. He's in front of the cameras. It's all over the South Florida papers, even getting some national attention. It comes to us because it came from the president of IKEA, a guy named Mike Smith, calls up, says, I'm getting calls now directly from Marco Rubio. Mike Smith was basically called to Senate and Congress to testify about this. But what happened in between? Well, I'll tell you what the attitude was of IKEA at the time. And I'm trying to tell them, like, look, this is a political issue. You're going into a political campaign. Marco Rubio is a guy they're talking about running for president in the next election cycle. You don't want to mess with this guy. He's out for something. He's out for something. So I talked to the media relations person and the store manager, because it was the three of us with human resources, the operator, all the principals of that building, which I was one of. And I'm trying to explain to them how this can hurt us, that we're going to start getting protests, and if we don't nip this in the bud and figure this out, a way to respond to this honestly and correctly, it's going to hurt us. And lo and behold, this was the attitude of the media director and the store manager. They said, well, we already spoke, we spoke to Mike, and there's been like back and forth with him and Marco. And him and Marco both realize, as do we. These Latinos down here, they'll go out and they'll protest in front of the store and scream and yell about this, okay? And then as soon as they're done, they're coming right in and buying a Hemmes dresser, which was like basically their big seller in IKEA because it's all Swedish. Okay, because it's cheap. We're not going to lose a single dollar. Not a single dollar. That was the attitude. And the next day, everything was fine. Mike Smith had talked to Marco Rubio and everything. Oh yeah, IKEA doesn't do that, and we're all good now. Really? Really? Now, you could say maybe they lied to him, to Marco Rubio. They didn't, because after I left IKEA, I sent him all the evidence of that, because there was stuff in email as well. Comments about making fun of him, not taking him seriously, about the Latinos, that they're just going to scream and yell outside the store, and then while they're screaming and yelling, either they're going to come in when they're done, or they're going to send their kids in afterwards to buy our cheap merchandise anyway, and we're not going to lose a single solitary cent. And basically it was said, Marco Rubio's been taken care of by the company. So it was really just using these Cuban prisoners, IKEA, this IKEA story, which is absolutely provable. If you really wanted to find out, it's absolutely provable, because it's still happening out in Russia. They're using North Korean and Russian political prisoners now to do it, and it's still going on. But he wanted a little notoriety for himself. He wanted a little juice, knowing he was going to be running for president probably three and a half years later. And he threw his own people under the bus. He threw his own Cuban population, his Cuban political prisoners, which he loves to hang his hat on. How much he supports Cuba and our policy. He's full of it. He's another politician who was bought off by a company that he had a legitimate beef against for his Cuban people, which he states he loves so much. He doesn't. He loves himself. And that's the bottom line. Because this was all provable information, and I was there firsthand, and I saw it. So Marco Rubio is nothing more than another run-of-the-mill politician that will do and say and throw anybody under the bus he needs to in order to get elected. So should you vote for Marco Rubio? Hell no. Please subscribe to my new politics channel, Generation X Politics. The link is in the box. Also, link in the box is to my GoFundMe from my narcissism channel. This is Ollie Matthews, Generation X Politics. Please stand by for my next video. Thank you.